I'm not guilty, okay? I'm not a drug dealer and I'm certainly not a criminal. I've been framed.
This is a story of Josh Queen, my young brother. He is a big fan of marijuana, which has gotten him into his fair share of trouble. And he is now at the top of the most wanted list. He is now looking for a way out, and he's going to find out who did this to him. Josh warns Tom, because Tom had once tricked him when they were stoned. But Tom said, "It's not true. You've just been confused for a long time and not at the right attention." Then Josh asked also his best friend Romy, but then he tells him to be calm. But he gets confused with all this fuss. Don't smoke too much, Josh. Everything seemed going to be wrong, and he looked out of window while drinking a glass of Jack Daniels. He is waiting for his old girlfriend. Now he was simply waiting for his girlfriend to arrive. He had not seen very much over the past 3 years, but he only saw an old woman sitting there, waiting. Suddenly, he heard a knock on the door. When he answered, Vivi Erlene was standing there, ready to greet him. They embraced, holding each other close. It was only natural, since it had been almost a year since they last saw each other. They are now passionately affectionate and continue the feelings they had previously established. Their relationship grew closer, and finally Josh told what had happened in his life. When Josh told Vivi what he was being accused, she couldn't believe it. How could it be? She always knew him as a kind and a friendly person. He needs to keep running as if he was being chased by a pack of wild dogs. Josh was frustrated, knowing this would mean he would be apart from Vivi Ponsmore. As he made his way through town, a policeman was standing on a street corner nearby. The policeman seemed to be on the lookout at someone. Josh becomes scared and hides behind a tree. His breath hitched as he nervously looked at the policeman and plotted his next move. After a moment, he had an idea. He stood behind a man walking his dog and offered to pay him if he could pretend to make a crazy distractions. After a few tense moments, it seemed like the plan had worked. The policeman didn't see him. Suddenly, an old man appeared from behind, smiling at Josh. He said that he knows that Josh was being chased. Josh was shocked.
You were watching me. Who are you? And how do you know who I am?
It's a game, kid. It was only a Pac-Man game, where you were the one of being chased by the ghosts, said the old man. Pac-Man game. The old man said Josh's life is exciting and unique. Most of the people want the kind of excitement he has, but they just can't find it. Adventure is what Josh likes.
Yes, I do like adventure. I just never expected all of this.
The man continued telling Josh that this is not just any game, it was a game of purpose. He wanted Josh to understand this game starts with fear. And with those words, the old man handed Josh a box, which he said represented the gift of hope. The old man introduces himself as Mr. Matthews. Inside the box was a small pearl. His pearl was named Octavia, and Mr. Matthews believed it would help Josh in coming days. Josh was caught off guard by all of this. He found himself desperately believing in what Mr. Matthews told him, that no matter the obstacles, he would learn the truth and clear his name. Vivi says, Sally, I am really worried about Josh. At the first was nice just seeing him, but then he talked about being chased. Is this real, or he could just be smoking too much weed? After that, Vivi really needs to talk to Sally. Sally tries to remind her that all of this is confusing, and Josh needed Vivi's support. Sally finished by telling Vivi that even though he was over his head, he could still become a better person. Without thinking, Vivi walked towards the street to the 2 nearest taxi and opened the car door. The taxi driver introduces himself as Don Julio. Vivi asked where she wanted to go, and Vivi responded that she was going to the library.
Do you want to smoke, lady? This is my first today. Tastes better when you don't smoke early in the morning. Go ahead. You know what they say. Smoking makes friends.
Don makes her uncomfortable. On the outside, she tried to look carefree, but inside she wanted nothing more than to get out of this annoying man's taxi. As the taxi arrived at its destination, Don Julio continued his weird behavior and suddenly took a selfie of himself and Vivi. A few blocks away from the library, Josh and Vivi sat together in a cafe. He tells her that the meeting was a risk. Vivi told that she was starting to believe he was telling the truth. Josh has plans to get out of the country. At the airport. Later, Josh went to the airport and dressed as a pilot. Sneaky ever, he had managed to acquire some spare pilot's clothing by smooth-talking the airport hotel laundry service. As he entered the airport alongside several flight attendants, he still couldn't believe he had gotten away with this part of the plan. Airplane. Once in the airport, he sweet-talked a gate attendant to convince her that he was part of a deadheading crew that will be flying out of the plane's destination, Rome. When Josh made it to Rome, he met up with an old friend named Gianni. They had not seen each other since Josh studied abroad in Rome many years ago. It was Gianni's chimpanzee, Giuseppe. Josh had not seen him since he was a baby. Josh needed everyone to listen to him. He is in trouble back home, and he had a reason to believe the mafia is the one who framed him. His friends listen attentively. They suggest that he takes his mind off things with all little fun. They were happy to be reunited. After a few hours, Josh rushed to take the taxi back to his hotel for some much-needed rest. The next day, Vivi arrived in Rome. She felt a little out of place since she had never been to Rome before, but she knew it was important to Josh that she be there. At the hotel. Even at the hotel, Vivi was still uncomfortable with this completely different Italian culture. The people were a bit too friendly and loved to flirt. Having spent almost a year in Italy before, Josh was accustomed to the affliction Italian people show. The two of them went to the restaurant to catch up. They were relieved that their plan to meet up in Rome had worked. Vivi had been thinking about him last night. She was worried Josh might have gotten caught while boarding the plane. After dinner, Josh took Vivi to one of his favorite hangouts where they could dance the night away. They look at each other's eyes and remember when they fell in love for the first time. It was the first night when he first took her dancing. They still didn't know each other very well at that time, but she couldn't resist his charm. That moment, as he held her in his arms, he confessed his love for her. She didn't know what to say then. It was the first time he said in love with her. She shouted that like she was the queen of the world. Yes, I am the queen of the world. After drinking a lot of alcohol, Josh acted like someone who was already high. This made Vivi uncomfortable, but inebriated and exhausted, Josh went to a hotel and lay down. He drifted into a peaceful sleep. Vivi got a call from someone saying that she had to leave Josh. Vivi suspiciously left Josh. The person who called her was waiting in a car. Vivi found an old man waiting for her. Though still suspicious, the old man attempted to calm her down. "Let's talk," he suggested. Wait. Josh woke up and realized that he was alone in the hotel room. Meanwhile, outside the hotel, the police had arrived after receiving a tip that Josh was staying there. After hearing the sirens, Josh peeked out of the window. One of the officers noticed the movement of the window. The police officer recognized Josh's face and alerted the police officer that Josh was in the hotel. There was no way out for Josh. He needed to give himself up. It looked like Josh's luck had finally run out. At the police station. As Josh was brought in, other police officers gathered to catch a glimpse of one of the biggest criminals to be arrested in Rome in recent years. Josh tries to convince the officers that he wasn't really a criminal. Someone had framed him, but the police didn't believe him. They referred to their evidence wall, which had photos and document all incriminating Josh. Suspect, Josh Queen. As far as the police were concerned, Josh was indeed a top criminal, so they booked him. Josh was flown back to a prison near his hometown, where he received his new prison ID. In the prison, his sentence was 30 years. During his first day in prison, he saw other prisoners playing basketball. Josh, still believing that he didn't belong in this prison, watched them from a distance. The population of the prison included not men only, but female inmates too. All of them lived the same, monotonous prison life. Josh knew prison would be different from his life in the world outside. Most of the day, Josh felt so alone, living one dreary day to the next. At other times, he felt claustrophobic, from all the bodies huddled together in a confined space. The only person could Josh connect with was the prison psychologist. As time went on, Josh shared his story, and he believed that he was framed. Josh revealed that he had considered escaping when he first got there, but included that escape would be impossible. The wall of the prison was too high. After a pause, the psychologist told Josh there was another way to escape. The prison was old and has a series of ancient tunnels connecting parts of the building. Josh can secretly make a hole. If the tunnel was completed, the psychologist could arrange for a contact to meet him on the other side to help him. It was a long shot, but the psychologist told Josh that it was his best chance to make it out. Josh knew he didn't have many options, so he reluctantly agreed. The psychologist told Josh to start digging the hole slowly, covering his work up with a piece of prison furniture. While the prisoners were each in their respective rooms and the guards were busy, Josh could make his escape without being noticed. By then, dusk will have fallen on the prison, which would further help him flee from the prison in the growing darkness. Josh thanked the psychologist, but wondered why he would help him. He then handed Josh a gift, a small pearl, that the psychologist's son was going to give to his fiancée before he died. The pearl Octavia can bring luck. Vivi got another call from Mr. Matthews that Josh was now in prison for 1 month. Vivi became anxious and angry, why she only found out now. Her younger brother told Vivi that she had to visit Josh in prison. This is all to let you know what really happened to Josh. After giving it some thought, Vivi agreed with her brother and took a taxi straight to the prison. By then, Josh had finally succeeded in digging his tunnel. When dusk fell, he ran through the tunnel towards freedom, his breath echoing against the walls. Fortunately for Josh, the prison guards monitoring the security camera did not notice his empty cell yet. In the prison, a woman in a cell near Josh's drew the attention of the prison guards, complaining about a stomachache. Luck seemed to be on his side. The guards patrolling the prison continue like it's business as usual. The jailbreak continues to go unnoticed. Josh knew it was only a matter of time before the guards realized he was gone. The question was, how much time did Josh have left? As Josh made his escape, Vivi arrived at the prison. She was eager to see Josh. It had been months, and the ride to the prison had built up her anticipation. Vivi couldn't wait any longer. When the guard went to get Josh, he was surprised to discover that Josh was no longer in his room. All the guard could see was the enormous hole in the back wall. Josh had officially made it out of jail. He was free, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the police found him again. Sure enough, the police were already preparing a helicopter to aid the effort to find Josh. They questioned the prisoners to see if anyone knew about Josh's escape plan, but no one knew. At this point, Josh was exhausted. It had been a very hot day, he was really thirsty, and the psychologist's contact was nowhere to be seen. Just as he began to despair, the psychologist's contact, Samuel, arrived ready to help Josh. Near the prison, a police officer gave a brief to journalists, warning the town that a top-class criminal had escaped. The town was officially on high alert. After the interview, the police sent the journalists home, telling everyone to stay indoors until Josh had been captured and the danger had passed. Meanwhile, Samuel asked Josh what he needed to complete his escape. Josh wasn't sure, He needed some time to plan. In an operations room, the police continued to keep track of reports coming in from officers. The search was on, but would Josh be found? Suddenly, a report came in. The helicopter had spotted 2 men below. They immediately contacted the officers on the ground to intercept. Josh and Samuel running through the forest, trying to lose the helicopter above. Things look desperate, but Samuel finally has an idea. Samuel had brought Josh some street clothes to wear after he escaped. They changed into the clothes and put some fabric over their faces to act as masks. Unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, the police finally caught up to them when they saw Samuel exit an alley. The police pointed their guns. But Samuel was standing there alone. Where did Josh go? The police had no proof connecting Samuel to Josh and couldn't keep him for long. Meanwhile, Vivi was at home cooking while listening to the news about Josh. Where could he be? Her brother noticed that she was listening to the news. He turned the TV off and sat next to her. He told her he was wrong, that she should not have seen Josh. He advised that she stop thinking about Josh. Vivi pretended to listen to her brother, but in her heart she knew she couldn't stop worrying. Josh was relieved to escape the police for now. He was standing near the place he and Vivi used to hide together when they were younger. Josh checked his pocket for Octavia, the pearl. He held it in his hand and softly spoke to it, asking when his life would turn back to normal. Suddenly, a white car arrived. Josh was ready to make a run for it until he saw that it was Vivi sitting in the driver's seat. She knows the place that they first met. Vivi was happy to have a few moments alone with Josh, but she knew this moment wouldn't last. Josh agreed that after the escape, he was more of a criminal than ever before. But he still wanted to clear his name. Their reunion was great, even if Gianni's insistence that Josh was a criminal drove him a little crazy. Josh and Vivi decided it would be best for him to hide out at his grandmother's house. It would also give them a little more time together in the car, if only for a moment. At Grandma's house. Josh and Vivi arrived at Grandma's house. While there, she showed Josh some old photos of his father. Josh was really interested to see all the photos. His grandmother revealed that Josh's father was a criminal in the past. He lied and stole a lot of money. In fact, that was the true reason he was killed. Grandma teared up a bit as she continued to tell him that now they wanted to find him. Vivi said, "But Josh, have you thought about this rationally? These people who are after you are professionals. If you try to fight back and take revenge, it could be fatal." Josh said, "I'm sorry, Vivi. I have no doubt in my mind. These people killed my own flesh and blood. I need to find out who did this." Josh had come to realize this pearl was more special than he originally thought. Josh grabbed his father's old pistol and reloaded it, vowing to get revenge at any cost. Josh called an old buddy up, an ex-private investigator. Romy was happy to help, but didn't know how Josh planned to find the man behind his father's death. But Josh had a plan. He had gotten an old photo of the man behind his father's death from his grandma's album. To give Josh more time to find his father's killer, Romy goes on TV, claiming to have information on where Josh is. Coming from an ex-private investigator, it's the perfect distraction. With time on his side, Josh went on the hunt for his father's killer. Once he knew he bought enough time, Romy ended the interview by saying that Josh was an innocent man on the hunt for his father's killer.
So, he wants to catch me. How does he expect to do that? I'm an expert in this field. Whatever his plan may be, I will stop it in its tracks.
Josh looked again at Octavia once more to discover where his father's killer was. He could be anywhere, because he was already in town. In fact, at that moment, he was watching Josh talk to the pearl from the shadows.
Octavia, the fabled pearl sage. That is what I want in compensation for what Josh's father did to me, and I have just a plan to get it.
Meanwhile, a group of protesters gathered outside a nearby museum. The exhibit was missing its prized artifact, a small pearl called Octavia. The protesters shouted, "Save Octavia! Return her to where he was found." The protesters became rowdy, rioting for the pearl's return. Seeing the chaos, Josh looked at Octavia in shock. What was this pearl? She must return to the place where she come from. The mysterious Mr. Matthews appeared behind Josh once again. He warned Josh that Don Julio, his father's killer, is also looking for the pearl and wants to steal it before it can be returned where it came from. Josh said, "So you need me to bring Octavia to the place where she came from?" Mr. Matthews said, "Yes, she belongs there. She needs calm and peace." Josh became ill and went to the hospital. Josh entered under a different name. The doctor examined him, asking what was wrong. Josh didn't fully understand what was being said to him. He began to feel sick. He had loved Octavia and didn't want to let her go. Meanwhile, Josh didn't recognize that the doctor was Don Julio, the man who had killed his father and had dyed his hair blonde. The doctor asked Josh to take off his clothes and hang them by the door. Josh puts his wallet on a table near the door. Then he went to the room next door to change into the patient's gown. Unbeknownst to Josh, Don Julio sees his opportunity. He knew where the pearl was. While Josh was distracted, Don Julio seized the opportunity and grabbed Octavia from Josh's belongings and placed it in his own pocket. Meanwhile, Vivi was meeting up with yours truly, me. She wanted to catch me up on Josh's plan, and we both needed a bit of support. Meanwhile, the city was still crowded with demonstration until late into the night. They still need Octavia back to her place. As Vivi left the bar where we met, a mask suddenly covered her face. She had been kidnapped. Later, Josh had finally caught up with Don Julio. He realized the pearl was missing and chased after the culprit. A group of people ran in fright when they heard the gunfire. Don Julio smirked, challenging Josh to choose, save the pearl or save Vivi. Vivi was crying in fear. She wanted Don Julio to let her go. To help his escape, Don Julio planted a bomb in a nearby building with Vivi. All he had to do was wait for the distraction. Josh's blood began to boil. He wanted to beat the guy up and kill him. He holds his gun at the ready. Suddenly, the explosion rocked the building in front of him. Josh was shocked by what had happened. Romy continues to field questions from journalists, even as the building explodes. Back to Josh, a familiar voice appears once again. Mr. Matthews said, "Josh, we have good news and bad news. Which do you want first?" Josh wanted to hear the bad news first. Mr. Matthews said that Vivi is dead. Josh said, "No. You are kidding, right?" Mr. Matthews said, "You can check into the building that just exploded." Josh checked the building and found no one. He thought it was a joke. Mr. Matthews smiled and said, "It looks like the bad news is only because you lost Vivi. But do you want to hear the good news?" "Josh, I'm here. It seems like you're feeling my absence," said Vivi. Josh looks around and says, "Vivi, you are alive. You've been played by a child. All of this, the chase, the prison, the psychologist, the pearls. It's all just a show. It's all for your birthday." With this surprise, Josh reached the pinnacle, and everyone exclaimed, "Happy birthday, Josh." Romy and Josh were happy it was all over. They took photos with everyone who asked. Suddenly, Don Julio arrived with his gun again and said, "I am not gonna give up, kid." Josh said, "Oh no, you weren't in on it too." After a moment, Don Julio laughed and said, This is one of the greatest show ever made." The crowd cheered again in agreement. Josh and Vivi got together and took a picture together. They had been quite the stars of the show. Mr. Matthews asked, "But where is Octavia?" Mr. Matthews and Romy looked for Octavia.
"Finally! I get Octavia! Ha 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 ha!"